Yes, thank you. As Michaela mentioned, I'm in Umeå. I am still in Umeå at the moment. I was hoping to be there. I saw Tom in the audience. It would have been lovely to see you, and Francisca as well, and all the good people. I am definitely getting better. Still not entirely up to speed, so it was best not to travel, I felt. Maybe a little bit more about me. I have been part of the Music Tech Fest community for about a decade now, I think. Been doing music and hacking and internet activism and that sort of thing. My research background is in natural language processing and formal languages. Then by way of like the digital humanities and digital musicology, I made my way here to the Responsible AI group at Umeå University with Regina Dignam. It's been a great 3 years so far. And yeah, I'd like to talk to you about data ethics and the AI Policy Lab. Take one thing at a time, more or less. And one of the things that has been sort of recurring during this week in many of the presentations, many of the discussions on Monday and Tuesday that I was privy to, is that all data is wrong, right? There is something that is missing from the data at all times. And I think this is a crucial insight, one of two that I will talk about, for thinking ethically about data, because this really sort of limits the amount of trust that you put into the data. It makes you keep in mind that this is all a sort of abstract picture of the world at best. And it highlights that this data is socially constructed. Not just in the sociological sense, but it also comes from a social context. And I'll go a little bit more into sort of what I mean by that. Because what is data? Data is digital. What does that mean? It means that it's discrete, and the world isn't. The world is continuous and chaotic. It is unorganized and interconnected. You have all of these things that sort of connect in various different ways. And any datafication of the world is the digitization of the world. It's a discretization of the world. It's a grid that we put upon the world. And we choose what resolution that grid has, how we discretize things. Some of those choices come from like the physical properties of the sensors that we use, for example. But it's still a choice. It is we could use different sensors in most cases. What is the resolution of the camera that we're using? And this has massive impacts on the data. And it has massive impacts on what we then can do with that data, right? And the map is not the territory. The models that we're feeding this data with, that we're building this we're building out of this data that we're getting about the world, they are models. They are not the world. The only simulation of the world is the world. And that is a necessary thing because we use models for things that we cannot use the world for. We'll get to that as well. But the point is that we are excluding aspects of the thing that we're modeling. The spherical cow is a good example where we are excluding the shape of the cow. And it is frictionless. It does not, we exclude that aspect. We exclude all of these different aspects to make an understandable model, right? We are simplifying the connections and relationships that are in the thing that we're studying. And usually, we are omitting the context. We're saying this spherical cow exists in a vacuum with nothing else in the universe. Or the thing that it's falling towards forever. Or we're, at the very least, we're minimizing the context. We're saying that, okay, so this social dynamic that we're studying exists in a society which has an impact. We can model that using some kind of rest term, for example. And if we're working not only with models, but with computer models, this makes things even more abstract, even more sort of divorced from reality, right? Because even then, the continuous aspects of the world that we have in our model can no longer be continuous because, again, we're dealing with digital data, digital computers. All of these relationships, which have already simplified into it is a friendship, it is a romantic relationship, it is something, someone being part of a state. They have to be, by dint of being included in the computer, even more simplified and ambiguous and made clear, because that is the way that computers work. They work with digital and simple and unambiguous data. There's some complications here, of course. You can have overlapping relationships and whatnot, but you need then to actively model that. You have to make all of those connections clear and unambiguous in the computer, so that then that computer can sort of represent all of this. There's some, again, nuances here. We're talking about neural networks that Robert was talking about previously. But that is still a choice of how you choose some kind of data distribution that you're representing using this model. And in particular, when you're working as a human with a model, you can recognize that, okay, so this context that we're sort of omitting, that doesn't really, we can't really do that. We need to bring that in. We need to think more deeply about how that context impacts the model, which computers can't do. So again, the human needs to be there and sort of act on this. And that about models. So data, in this sense, is not random. There's no random data. It has always been saved and stored for a purpose. And there's always been data that could have been saved instead. Data collections that could have been made instead. And there are reasons, historical reasons, for that data to have made it to you and to your model and to whatever you're trying to model. You can have chosen that, or it can have be, if we're talking about stuff like large language models, for example, where you use a lot of crawling of the internet. There are reasons why that data was on the internet in the first place, and there are reasons why the crawler engine found that data and not the thing that was on the server next door, right? So it has all data has historical context and intention, and it has also historical context in a different way, in that it has certain data formats, and those data formats also have a historical context. Why HTML and why not Gopher? What made one win out over the other, and so on. And then perhaps the most salient question of how was this data produced and by whom and under what conditions, especially again when we're talking about AI and these massive data labeling operations, which often have very harsh and tricky working conditions, and with underpaid people working in the third world and in refugee camps and in prisons on labeling data for the use of these massive and very highly valued AI companies. The work by Milagros Micheli and the Distributed AI Research Institute can help sort of is a good source for looking more deeply into that. So data has intention, it has a historical context. And all of that means that data is wrong and all models are unfair in some way, but we use them. And we should use them because they're very useful. You use data for understanding, for simplifying, for abstracting how things in the real world fit together. That's a fundamental thing that we do as humans. You can use model to automate things. If you enclose something in a very specific context, you can automate how that process works. We can use models to fiddle with and do thought experiments. What if the world didn't work like this, but we instead had this parameter, change that? What would that happen? And in particular, we can use models to project things into the future. We can guess how things work. Excuse me. But that's all guesswork. and it's all socially constructed. And so remembering all this is like one of the basic things about data ethics. And the other thing is that ethics is about the real world. It is not about what goes on in the computer, what goes on in models. It is about real things. It's about humans, and it's about material impacts in the actual world, on actual people. And too often, maybe engineers and computer engineers have a tendency to see users, for example, as a peripheral that occasionally spits out input. And that can have disastrous consequences. And maybe decision makers see the people that they're deciding things about, they're building systems about, as little more than data points. And so the other basic thing about data ethics is to see the human, to remember that it is people that are the thing that you're making ethical decisions about. And that includes data workers, it includes developers as well, it includes data subjects, people that the data is about, but it includes the decision makers that are maybe supported by your decision support system or that are deciding on how these systems should be built. And I mean it in two ways. So I mean that also in the way that you need to remember that you are human, that you have the responsibilities and moral agency of a human, with all that sort of with all that follows. And so I'd like to sort of end this little session about data ethics with a quote from Granny Weatherwax of the Discworld books, that sin is treating people as things, including yourself, saying that no, I couldn't make another decision because I got this data, or I could not make a decision because the system was set up this way. That is abdicating moral responsibility, and that is treating yourself as a thing, as only a robot. And that is, I would say, nearly as bad as treating other people as robots, treating the data workers as just something that labels your data and not as full humans who have rights and who have their own complex lives. And I think that will also, it will lead to a more benevolent system if you remember these things. And I think it will honestly result in a better working system in many cases, because these are important things to remember, the things about data quality. And what Kat was saying just now about participatory data collection is that is a really, really good way of going about doing these things. So, with that little bit said, a little bit about the AI Policy Lab. AI Policy Lab here at Umeå University is a multidisciplinary initiative to develop knowledge, governance, and policy frameworks to guide AI today and into the future. So that means that it is a space for researchers from many different areas to come together and work on and evaluate and understand how AI policy works. It is hosted here, but we're at Community Science, but we're also welcoming fellows from across the university and across the world. We have shared facilities where we host researchers and visitors, and we have some bi-weekly seminars that are open to all interested parties. And the idea is to cultivate a research community, really. And there's a number of things that we do to do that. We have a number of research approaches and research topics, but the main thing is dialogue. The main thing is that you talk to other researchers who have expertise in other fields. The main thing is talking to policymakers and to data subjects and data users, and AI users, and understanding their perspective. And yeah, so I'll just let you read this slide, but moving on now. So in particular for like fostering this dialogue, we have these seminars. First one was on Tuesday, next one is in 1.5 weeks. We have some open soapbox sessions for researchers at university. Those can be streamed live, but no guarantees on that. We were organizing a number of workshops. Details will be forthcoming on the homepage. And then we have what is maybe most interesting for a lot of you, I think, is the AI Policy Exchange. And the AI Policy Exchange is an open online environment aiming to promote academic discussions on all aspects of AI policy and governance. So it is somewhere between a blog and a journal. We don't do a lot of heavy peer review, but we ask people to sort of stick to a somewhat reasonable format, and we do like basic checking to see that it's more or less on topic. It makes more or less sense. And then we have comments are open, so people can make comments. I'll show you I will not show you the site because I'm in the slides. But you can go to the aipolicylab.se/apex to see a little bit more about it. And if you click on AI Apex contributions, you'll see one contribution by Diana Hopa, who I believe will be speaking later today, and was also speaking earlier this week. And we welcome all comments and reflections on AI policy on there. And I think that's going to be a really sort of useful tool for fostering a good research community on AI policy. We're open collaborations. We have the first set of student interns joining us just a few weeks ago, hard at work. We have some fellows from across the university and across the world, and exchanges with other universities as well. So if this sounds interesting to you, please get in touch. And I think by now I have used up my 50 minutes and change. So I'll just leave you with this slide and hope to see you at the next event in person.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Peter Ericson.